my role here is very much to facilitate the discussion, but don't take anything that we would be, or I would be particularly saying as committing the EIT, because I am under the scrutiny of the board and the institutions, so please take with due care what we would be sharing. Vice versa, I could say, the KICs have a lot of flexibility, they have their knowledge dynamics, and it remains to be seen to what extent applicants would consider models which are being put in at work, or simply come up with their own approaches for governance, a number of things that we will be discussing. So with this in mind, I would now ask Mary to hand over the building blocks for the questions we wanted to offer. And well, just to formulate the menu, I think there would be, at least 10 building blocks of questions. But of course, the best is that we would fill this up with content that comes from the audience. If you don't have content to offer, I would present the questions. So, it's a good practice for facilitators. From my side, well, the building blocks could be like legal questions, the governance, management, second block. The third one could be staff, the partners, collocation centers, funding and finance, stakeholder relations and branding, business model, the knowledge triangle, and preparing a call, the tips. So these are the 10 building blocks. I don't know, you want to offer any word of introduction, or we could simply go, okay. So first of all, starting with this, and I guess we have microphones in the room, so you can basically present your questions for clarification to any of the KICs. And starting then with the legal setup. If there is anything of particular interest, here I would like to draw to your attention that in fact there was a study about the legal setup of the KICs. So this might be something that again we formulate in these documents we would be producing in the near future. But any question concerning the legal setup, the identity, in what countries register, tax regimes?
So Mark Parsons, University of Edinburgh. It actually goes back to a conversation we had earlier this morning, sorry, a question earlier about intellectual property. Now, what was unclear to me after that answer you gave was, has each of you developed your own IPR rules? And do you see, if we have 3 more KICs, each of them developing their own, or is the idea for the EIT to be more homogeneous in its treatment of IP, or do you feel that it's working in this model, that it allowed you to do what was best for your particular area that you're focusing on?
I'll start. This really echoes something that Diego said earlier, which was, I think it took you 9 months. It took us a long time. I think, well, first of all, we did all do it separately. And I still haven't seen the IP policies of my companions. I haven't asked either. But, and so I think actually it's something that you do within a KIC, because you have different partners, it's a different industry, it's a different sector. And I suspect you'll come to a different answer. So intellectually, that's my answer. And pragmatically, it is just such a lot of work anyway, that trying to incorporate views of yet another, 50 partners, I think would make it very difficult.
Yeah, I could say a few things. As I said already before, I mean, IPR is something you can talk about forever, and that's also what's actually happening. So I don't know. I mean, I find it, to be honest, it gets far too much value, and it's a extremely nice inhibitor to innovation and progress. I think it would help if at the EIT level there would be some support for what kind of IPR agreements you would like to see in a KIC. It's also, you have to see the structure is a bit complex, because you have a legal entity. Some of the KICs also have national legal entities, and all these legal entities are bound together by contractual relationships. And then you have the partners, which are their own entities, of course, that have, again, contractual relationships with the KIC. For me, what's most important is that the KIC legal entities in themselves have enough freedom of operation without infringing on the partner rights. Because if you start infringing on the partner rights, you immediately run into deadlock situations. And so that's the general principle, and you have to set something in place. At the same time, being involved in many IP deals at Philips, IPR is very simple. It's on a case-by-case basis. It's just a business thing, and you can make the calculation: is this the right price I'm going to pay for this part of IPR? Yes or no? And if no, the business is not working, and if yes, you do it. It's as simple as that. So that's why I said, I mean, but you can spend years and years. I mean, the European, you saw what happened in the European Parliament, and it was in Strasbourg that the first amendment was that Liz postponed the whole discussion because we don't know enough yet. Which was successful, and then the whole thing was blocked for another whatever time. So if you want to spend your energy on useless things, please mobilize all your KIC lawyers to work on IPR.
Well, I'm a bit more positive about IPR, in the sense that, at least in our KIC, the way we start anything we do is we define what we want to do, we see what each one of the partners bring, and that is what we call background. We identify what needs to be developed to complement this background with foreground, and altogether we'll deliver the product or service. And as Willem says, it's extremely easy to come to an agreement because it's a commercial agreement. But you need still that in the culture of the company, and this is what we have done in KIC Energy, that the policy, the guidelines, the valuation rules are one and the same for everybody. So when they come to the specific case of whatever technology, then there is little to discuss. It's just about percentage. What is your share, what is my share? Because everything else is solved. I don't think, to your second question, I don't think that the EIT ruling a common IPR policy will bring much value, because, as Mary was saying, each sector is different. In energy, the value chain is pretty straightforward. In ICT, the patent pool taxonomy was created for ICT because it's a pool. You don't know what is needed because everything is needed. In your iPhone, it's maybe 5,000 patents. Are all of them needed? We don't know, but you have paying 5,000 and royalties to everybody. So each sector has got its own stress on which way to go. So I don't think a common general EIT ruling on this will bring any value.
Just to add to that, so I'm not making a plea for a generic IP policy at EIT level. I think it would help, however, if there is some guidelines on what kind of IPR regulations one would like to see. And since this is such a difficult debate, I think especially when EIT is building a brand and setting up a reputation, innovation in how to deal with IP, it could be used to get some things moving, because a lot of things are simply deadlocked. So some guidelines and some push would help, but don't impose a specific model on the KICs, because that will not work for all the reasons that have been mentioned.
Okay, still on the legal chapter, any other question? A lot has already been said, of course, during the presentations. So I propose then we move to the next. Yes, there's some hands in the air over there.
I'm going to ask a question which I fear nobody might be able to answer, yet I have to ask it because people ask me this all the time. Is there any legal entity that you would consider particularly suitable to a KIC? And if so, which one would that be and why? Thank you.
And when I was not around when the shareholders decided which type of legal entity was chosen. Here in front of you, I have got 3 of them that are different, and each one fits its own business model and the motivations of the partners or the shareholders when they start up. So there is not the reference that will be the best fitted, the best suited for whatever. It's absolutely an ad hoc, depending on, again, business model and shareholders' interest.
Climate KIC is not a business with shareholders, it's an association. Well, I'll rewind. There may not be one legal entity that's good for all KICs, but there are some legal entities that are good for no KICs. And that was the one that Climate KIC started with. And so I was involved in restructuring and negotiating a completely new legal entity. So what we have is a Dutch association, and that's working very well. What we started with was a Dutch stichting, and I don't want to go into great legal details about it. We actually, when we put in the bid for Climate KIC, we actually took advice from a consultancy, who I would obviously never use again, but probably shouldn't name here. And they advised the stichting, and it was a disaster because for a very simple reason that when people sit on your governing board, on the steering committee, they are not representing their institutions, they're representing themselves as individuals. And it meant that every time we did anything, we had to get letters from their institutions that would cover them. And basically, it was a nightmare. So there are some things that don't work, but the association certainly does. The other thing to say is that we are an association now, but in a few years' time, if we've identified and grown our market and it's much more mature than it is now, there is absolutely no reason why we shouldn't then change our structure perhaps to a business one like energy. It's just that our sector is at a different level of maturity at the moment.
I think the summary is there is no, but that's what we knew already, right? So yeah, so we have a similar structure as the Climate KIC. I expect it to evolve with the evolution of the KIC in itself, because I mean, when the first 3 KICs were set up, nobody knew exactly what a KIC would be, what would be needed. We have changed our statutes and bylaws along the way already. To adapt to changing circumstances. So I think the most important is that the KIC partners understand that it's a tool to an end and not a thing in itself. So don't focus too much on this one either. Take something that works and adopt it when needed. And if that is the attitude that the partnership has, you will be successful. If people cling on to, oh, but it needs to be this or that and whatever, you get a very defensive attitude and it doesn't really make progress.
Let's move then to the next block, the management and the governance, linked to how the KICs are steered and the General Assembly, the teams, the CEO. Do you have any question, any curiosity left on this block? Internal processes, reporting, again, governance and management. It seems to be very clear. So, yeah, one there.
I don't know if this belongs in the previous section, but in terms of the contractual arrangements between the individual KICs and the EIT, could you expand what is required in terms of contractual arrangements and issues regarding liability of partners?
Yeah, I mean, we can elaborate, but it's a rather lengthy story, I would say. Most of the information you probably better get directly. There is a framework agreement and there are annual grant agreements. Then you have to make sure that the legal entity, of course, in contracts with his partnership, make sure that the obligations that fall on the KIC legal entity are somehow shared in that partnership, especially when you establish a legal entity, unless you put specific assets into it. It's an asset-led organization, which causes sometimes some trouble in the financial stability, and you have some discussions with the Commission. So I think that's something to really better look into when setting up the next set of KICs, that this is well being taken care of. Because there we had some difficulties in setting it up, getting the financial guarantees and so on.
Maybe Maybe as a complement to that, you have noted that there's this framework partnership agreement under which you have annual agreements. And of course, at the early days, there was no model. The model now exists, so hopefully it should be easier for the next wave of KICs. Any other question on this? Please.
Thank you. My question actually concerns the management during the process of setting up a KIC. What would be your recommendations? What should be the first steps of building the management for having a successful proposal in the end, for the preparation phase actually?
Yeah, I have a specific remark on that because just as Diego, I was not there when the whole thing was set up. And what I have seen is that, especially because it was the first set of KICs and so on, that people very much had a consortium agreement mindset when setting up the organization. And that means that the position of the KIC as a legal entity is not always clear, and the decision making is also not always clear in this setup phase. And my advice therefore would be is to have a kind of pre-installation of a formal legal entity which already in the preparation phase makes clear the governance and also is somehow empowered to make clear decisions on how the application will look like. And after the application, if you are successful, I assume there will be again negotiations with the EIT. And especially in that phase, it is good that you have a structure in place with clear decision making. And at least my experience in ICT labs was that this was developing along the negotiation process itself, and that is not ideal. So we made it, but it's better that is clear a bit more from the start.
I agree, absolutely. I was involved with the preparation, and the applications tend to start in small clusters, and then clusters coalesce when you find that there are, say, 3 or 4 of you all interested in climate change. I guess the call came out in April, and the deadline for submission was the end of August. So we had a busy summer holiday, and we actually did what Willem was recommending. So once we knew what the architecture of the KIC was going to be, and we knew who the core partners were going to be, we set up a steering committee with a representative from each core partner. And after we'd submitted on the 30th of August, that steering committee kept going, we kept working. It was quite an investment on the part of those core partners, but we knew we had to keep working so that we were thoroughly organized by the time we got to the hearing. And actually, having won the bid on the 13th of December, I think it was, that steering committee then mutated into the first governing board of the KIC. So the only mistake was that we then made the legal entity a stichting, but up to that point, we were doing everything just right.
But let me make a remark on that, because a similar situation happened in ICT labs, and there was a let's say, interim steering board that was doing that. However, this steering board still had no legal status, and so some decisions could be challenged and were actually challenged by legal departments from some of the partners saying, okay, there is not a formal decision body, so I'm not bound to any decision here. Of course, that was fixed, but you save a lot of time if that's clear up front, rather than that when that starts interfering with the decision-making process, things sometimes become a little bit blurry.
Actually, one other comment is that in addition to the steering committee, and this did help avoid sort of conflicts, because conflicts will arise. It's quite a stressful process. And we actually employed McKinsey to help us with it. And it was enormously helpful to have a third party who did not have a stake and who were not going to be involved after we'd submitted the bid. So I do recommend that as well.
You have to take the advice, but not the name of the company, I'm afraid. Good.
So, three comments from my side. The first one is, since I came also after the whole thing was put in place, discuss a lot on what you want to do. And then the vehicle for implementing what you want to do will come much easier if all the partners agree on what they want to do. So first the business model, and then the organization, management, whatever structures that will support it. Second comment is that when the 3 current KICs were created, the counterpart, that is the AIT, was also under creation. So it was a moving target in the 2 ends. So also in the KIC side, they were adapting to the proper adaptation and creation of the AIT. Now the context on the IT side is much more stable. So that will, let's say, take out freedom, degrees of freedom, and also increase the certitude. And the third, I was aware that also the KIC Energy Consortium that put the bid was held by consultants. And consultants is not because they bring anything special, but because they bring the neutrality. So whenever there are disputes coming on, there's always a neutral guy that takes the decision.
I suggest we move to the next building block of questions concerning staff, the partners. If you have any area of interest, how this is organized, you know, the team supporting the CEOs, the partners, how they are initially identified, what procedure is established, how large and small companies are imbalanced. It doesn't seem to be the case. You are all on the same page. So, yeah, that's easy. Then let's move to the next point about the collocation. Do you want to offer any?
Just one comment about partners, and I know you haven't asked any questions about it, but I think certainly for Climate KIC, it was very university-driven in the early stages, and then business came on board rather late. That may be different, I don't know, for the other 2 KICs, but that's not ideal, and you need business on board straight away. I mean, we matured, but I think if you want to do it more effectively, that would be the way I would advise.
Okay, I suggest then we move to the next section, which was about the collocation centers. Like how do you map competencies, the right mix of countries? You have any interest, or how are the actual setup of the collocations established in the early days? That is an important part of the proposal also. So I think you're a bit exhausted. Maybe it has been already presented. Yes, over there.
Yeah, I have a question with regard to the collaboration centers. Is this only in EU Europe or overall Europe, or is this, can there one center also be outside Europe? So this is not absolutely clear. I had several different voices on this.
Well, in our case, today we have partners, not only from Europe, contributing to what we want to do. Because what we do is what we call a competence mapping. So who are the best in 174 technology maps in the 6 thematic fields that we're addressing. And if the top 10 of those 174 sub-technology maps are in the States or in Israel or whatever, then we invite them to contribute to what we want to do. That's about the partners that contribute to activities. Today, out of the 120 plus, there are 4 outside Europe that contribute to the activities. In terms of collocations, collocations is a concept that is very much close to the business creation activities, where the geographical neighborhood plays a role. And there, my suggestion is the right number. Not too few, not too many, and because it's about management around those areas.
I was wondering what mechanisms you have in place to ensure collaboration between the co-location centres so you don't end up with silos across Europe.
Yeah, so the way we do this is that we actually have I would say, a matrix. So the pillars are the co-location centers, but the program of action lines is across, so it's a layer across. And we're actually quite keen on this European dimension. So if there is no European collaboration in your activities, it's 90% sure that we will not fund your activity. So that's how we really enforce this European collaboration.
In our case, it's a prerequisite. No activity will ever be funded if there are not at least 2 collocation centers.
Hello. I just wanted to ask, what do you think is the ideal distance? We're talking about collocation center partners. Can you have collocation centers that can extend over different countries? Can you have partners in the same collocation center that are, I don't know, 200, 300, 400 kilometers, 1,000 kilometers? What's your opinion on that?
Well, we take collocation quite literally. So we ask our partners to be very close to the collocation center. And so that means that the core partners should have activities in the proximity of 5 to 10 kilometers from the collocation center and should also be prepared to put people in our collocation center. Of course, we have innovation hotspots, which we call, which is the ecosystem in which we work. That are somewhat larger areas, but still with a diameter of let's say, 20, 30 kilometers. So we take it quite literally.
Ours are more geographically spread than that. It varies a little bit from one collocation centre to another. But the collocation centre really provides the focus of the activity. And the director of the collocation centre has good communication with all the partners. And they come, the events are held in the collocation centre, so it's the geographical focus as well as the activity focus. We don't have any partners at the moment who are in countries where we don't have a collocation centre. So all partners belong to a collocation centre or to a region, and they all are within the country of that collocation centre and region at the moment anyway. We're discussing the situation right now.
In our case, out of the 6 collocation centers, we have 4 that are pretty close in terms of the 10, 20 kilometers that Willem described. And we have 2 Benelux and Iberia, where in Benelux is in Eindhoven and in Leuven. So it's quite a few kilometers, and it's working nicely. In Iberia, it's between the Lisbon area and Barcelona. It's also working nicely. So I wouldn't say it's a prerequisite to have any whatever. It's, again, think about what you want to do and the instruments, vehicles, organizations to make it happen. Don't start organization-wise, start objective-wise.
So maybe worth mentioning is that there has been another study concerning collocations because the meaning is different in the 3 KICs, and there is, I think, at least part of the study which is public, so maybe that would attract your interest, and of course we will build upon this also when we would prepare future guiding documents. I don't see any other requests for the floor for this particular part, so I suggest that we move to the next section, which would concern the funding and finances. The 75% non-EIT funding, the fundraising, anything that you might be interested about on this section? I don't see any requests for the floor. Yes, there is one hand over there in the air.
Thank you. I have a question regarding the funding of the proposals. How much effort was put in the proposals, and who financed the phase until the KICs were installed?
That's a very good question. Basically, the institutions who were ultimately the core partners, so the institutions who formed the steering committee, funded it in kind with staff time, travel, etc. In addition, each institution put in, it was either 100 or 150,000 euros to fund the consultancy. So it was entirely funded by the potential partners. So you do have to really want to do this because it is quite costly. And also you have to sort of hold your nerve, if you like, because even when you've submitted it, as I told you, we kept working, and it was a lot of work that we did between the end of August and the beginning of December. And actually we were told on the 30th, we were told that we'd hear at the end of November whether we were shortlisted for the interviews, and we heard on the 30th of November. So that was September, October, November. For 3 months we kept funding it as well. So it's a commitment, yeah.
Yeah, it's actually the same for us. So as long as you are not selected as a KIC, the costs are for the consortium that is building it up. And these costs are quite steep. When you are accepted, you still have the negotiations. You get a preparatory grant. At least we got one. I don't know whether that will still be the case. But that by far does not cover the costs. So you have to be indeed very serious about it. And that's also something about which I would like to say, because people say, okay, how open are the KICs? Well, the KIC is open. However, people also have to realize that the core partners that did set up made huge investments in time and money to get this whole machinery running. So you should not expect to get a free ride jumping on when once the machinery has been put in place by others. So there should be a good balance on letting new partners in to also let them contribute to these huge initial investments, because they are pretty steep. So if you are not very, very serious and you do not, and that's also why having these big industries behind you is really a must, because they can cough up the amounts that are needed to make this really a success and really also get the commitment going. So don't underestimate.
Yeah, in our case, you know that I like numbers. We did the exercise post-mortem of how much was risk investment to prepare all this. And of course, the time of the people is of top-level people, so it's not cheap time. But also there was cost for third parties, like the consultants and everything else. So it's investment and real expenses and expenditure. It was 3.2 million. 3.2.
I'm interested in the role of national funding organizations in your in the proposal phase, let's say. Did you have any kind of a binding commitment from the national funding organizations that if your proposal will be elected, you will get funding from the national sources? I mean, public money.
In our case, no.
No, that in our case this was not the case either. There is also a problem with that, because I mean these competitions are just open, and you cannot pre-allocate to whatever party. So you're completely on your own, also from a national part.
Yeah, the answer is no.
I had a question on the financing of the KIC activities, and especially on the part of financing coming from industry. Can you elaborate on that, on how large the funding from industry is and how you have organized this? Is this a lump sum financing or project level? And then, yeah, for what kind of activities when it comes to education and the other activities in the KIC?
Well, I think the EIT has produced some fact sheets where all this information is already summarized. But to give from my numbers, you got me there. So for KIC Energy, the industry contribution 2011-2012 has been 31% of the total budget. When I mean total, is not the EIT part. It's 24% in 2011, 26% in 2012, but the overall, okay, 31%. And how is this contribution done from industry? in real money, as I shared this morning or this afternoon. For example, the boiler, 2.5 million, is purely out of the pockets of the P&L and balance sheet of the industry partners, but also in what is called the famous in-kind. So when we use laboratories, when we use the plants to test the new technologies, this is a contribution that is also valued as depreciation of the books or whatsoever.
Excuse me. Yeah, you just answered my question. Talking about contribution and public body like universities, if you consider as a contribution in kind, not a cash from research and university body, and on the other side, industry corporation just in cash. That's the first question. And the second one is, could it be possible to find all those numbers somewhere on the web you were talking about?
I know that those numbers have been collected, and
yes, there is.
I don't know how public they are.
Please visit the stand, because there are fact sheets collecting this for all three KICs. So you have the aggregate, but also the separate figures concerning the in-kind.
I mean the
national
expenses, mainly expenses to build up, to set up the KIC, etc.
Oh, for the setup of the KIC. Okay, yeah, well, Jacob gave the numbers, but he's probably not going to disclose the details.
Right, so the 3.2 I can disclose, how it was shared by the partners. I couldn't, even if I wanted, I can't.
All I can say is that we shared it equally, in the sense that in kind, the core partners all put in staff who spent a lot of time on it, and we travel sort of fairly co-equally. And then in terms of funding in real cash, we just shared it equally.
There was another question up there.
Thank you. Do you intend to participate in Horizon 2020? And if so, do you organize it through the KIC, or is it in each case, let's say, a complementary consortium of KIC members?
Well, yeah, do you participate in Horizon 2020? EIT is embedded in Horizon 2020, but I think what you are referring to is complementary instruments that will be available in Horizon 2020, and whether our partners will do something in those instruments as well, and what will be our coordination role in that respect. Is that the right interpretation of your question? Yes. So yes, we do this. So there is, with two organizations, we are really having a formal relationship. So that is the Future Internet PPP, for example, with whom we sign a memorandum of collaboration. That means that we as a KIC take specific measures to stimulate, in our case, carrier activities in those programs, which we will then combine with our catalysts. So we are playing a facilitating and coordinating role there, and we do a similar thing with ITEA, and that's more with the national governments, not with the Central European one. So we definitely take a role there. Of course, we have limited resources and bandwidth, so we will focus on a number of those initiatives, and of course we will always support our partners when they take initiatives themselves to participate in these instruments, and they will do, of course. Yeah, and if they want us to help, we will see whether we have resources available, we will do so. If not, they are on their own.
I suggest we move ahead. We are approaching, I think, the second part, or maybe the third part of the discussion. So maybe we'll need not so much time as we planned. Concerning the business models, but we have already, I think, listened about advice in this regard. Well, issues connected to sustainability of the case for the KIC and the KPIs, the way these objectives are assigned. If you have anything you would like to know in that regard. doesn't seem to be the case, so maybe the next block could be about the knowledge triangle, but we have talked extensively about this also, so I wonder, and the IPRs have already been mentioned. The last building block of the menu I proposed at the beginning concerned the preparation of the call. There have been some questions in that regard already. How much time and effort does it take? You have budget estimates. How long did it take between being accepted and becoming operational? That's something else. Processes should be ready. Actions that should be become priority. You have already some indications. What kind of activities should be on the decision side be prepared? Anything, that you might have an interest in on this last and final section. It's the last chance. It's the last chance. If you don't make your questions now, I think we'll have to look for future conferences and events.
Just an open question, really. Just as it might be one of the last ones, apart from what's already been covered, could you mention one thing that went seriously wrong and what you learned from that?
Well, for us, it was picking the wrong legal entity.
In our case, we took a lot of management time in the first year to redirect the portfolio of activities towards really output-driven ones. It was set up a bit as a la FP7. So let's find the money and let's decide what we do. And then to turn that in, let's see what we need to do. And then let's mobilize the resources. That took quite a long time of management repairing.
Yeah, I would say if it went seriously wrong, we would not be here. So, but there were things that did not go right. One of the things was, for example, the financing model. We were negotiating with the universities to support the master school, and that turned out to be a very difficult thing to set up. And there are more examples of things that went wrong, but that's done with individual partners or something. But that's not to disclose here in public. But of course, accidents happen along the way. And if all goes well, you're just not moving fast enough. So it's also a good sign.
So any other question here?
Can I just ask what the main positives are if you're trying to encourage other organisations to participate in the KIC structure? What are the things that have surprised you that have worked particularly well? Or where's the added value that you can get from a KIC which you can't get from other European programmes?
This is a question that should be clear to everyone, I must say, at the end of the conference. But please, again, yes. But you have the opportunity to impress still the audience. Willem.
Well, I mean, for me, it is two important things. Is that although, of course, in any funding scheme you are confronted with rules and regulations, but the way it has been implemented in the EIT and the principles that are being put in place really give quite some room for maneuvering, and that is quite good. But that can only be used effectively if you also have an effective governance model. Because if you have the freedom to operate, but not an effective way of managing the ecosystem, it doesn't help, because any option for operation will lead to huge discussions and not make any progress at all. So the combination of the relative freedom of operation you have with the what we then say run as a company, so an effective governance structure, I think those are the real key ingredients for the potential success of the KICs and the model, for me.
Well, if you have to pick two of them, the first one is in KIC versus the other programs, national or European, you decide what you want to do. You are not on the work planning, programming, road mapping. You pick and select what the partners decide is the best for their motivation and interest. That's extremely important. That's a huge difference. And the second one, as a manager, is the long-term commitment, also in contraposition versus the other instruments in Europe. Here, the shareholders, they sign up for 7 years. As I said this morning, it's a Catholic marriage. You cannot divorce along the way. And that gives a stability, all the extensions, of course, the stability for making happen what you decide what to do. So I'll pick up those two.
Yes, I mean, I would completely agree with what colleagues have said. I think it's the fact that it is a stable community. It's the fact that it's something it's a huge challenge. It's much more ambitious than anything else I think any of us have entered into. But the rewards, the potential rewards, are enormous. And for that reason, I think it's hugely worthwhile. And I think as a moral, there are institutions already involved in KICs that are talking about being involved in applications for the next tranche. And given how much work it is, I think that really shows you just how great it is in many ways. But in answer to the question that you haven't asked, but Jose Manuel did, it's a huge amount of work before you ever put your application in. So even if the call does not come out until Q4 of next year, you should be doing it right now. And you obviously are. You're thinking about it and you're here. So you're many steps ahead, I think, of the first KIC applicants. But we certainly started in a small cluster, actually the Idea League, which was 5 technical universities. And we started at least a year before the call came out, probably slightly more than that. So you're not starting too early. It's a very good idea to be here right now.
I don't see any other request for the floor, and I think it's very nice, in fact, to have the last statement maybe from Mary, because out of the 3 KIC CEOs, you were personally involved in the application process, and you even farther to that, survive this simplification and re-establishing. And you see, it's still motivated, so must be something behind. So I think we should pay tribute to you, but I would like to be also fair, because you know, this conference has meant also mobilizing a lot of stakeholders and collaborators for the KIC CEOs. I would like to really ask you to conclude this by thanking them and by maybe giving them an applause, because it's the first time we talk to Europe together. We had some time to prepare for this moment, but I think, well, inevitably previous conferences have been focusing more on the internal affairs, and I think now we have we can present now decently, I think, to Europe, and I'm very thankful to all 3 of you. So could I ask you to join in giving an applause, and we conclude like that.